Hi, everyone. Short round of introduction. So, Shai Frank, I'm with Optimove. If you don't know Optimove, it's a customer-led marketing platform. We help brands utilize their customer data to orchestrate campaigns across channels and achieve personalization at a high scale. And to you.
I'm Kristen Darcy, as introduced, CMO for a full 6 months at True Religion. Prior to that, in retail, feels like forever. Some great brands, Ralph Lauren, Oscar de la Renta, Coty Beauty across that portfolio, and then American Eagle and Aerie, among others. It's great to be here.
Ricardo, Lajoie. Oh, a little close here. Just first of all, I just want to thank Brand Innovators for the opportunity. Really excited to be here with these folks and have this conversation. But VP of Product Creation at Footlocker. Essentially, I am tasked with delivering on an ownable and distinct product proposition for the company. I've been with the company about 5 years, and prior to that, I've had stints at Gap, Urban Outfitters, and PacSun. So tremendous opportunity and learning experience across various organizations.
Okay, cool. So let's kick off. The holy grail of retail marketing for the past 20 years has been driving loyalty through relevancy and emotional intelligence, connecting with consumers, with both online and offline, with the right products and right offers at the right time, and so on and so forth. Now, this is still very much relevant today, but now with recent developments in the world, in economy and technology, with everything that's going on, what does retail renaissance mean to you?
I think if you take a step back to 50,000 feet, the word renaissance means revival. So I would say over the last 10 to 15 years, brands have been focused on a lot of the things that you mentioned. And how do we look at lower funnel performance marketing to make sure that we're driving the lowest CAC, trying to drive the highest LTV, and and as a digital marketer, I've loved it. It's been very scientific and financial and so forth. When I think about revival and I think about where brands are going in 2024, brand has to play a really, really big role in that. 6 months ago when I started at True Religion, we decided to invest more in brand. That was content creation with creators, original content in-house, partnering with the right celebrities, creating different tier structures, in addition to all the great performance marketing work that was being done. Interestingly, we hired an outside firm, LEK, to do a market study in December. And what we learned is that within a target consumer of 18 to 45 years old, it was a sample panel, but our net promoter score is second just behind Nike, which is incredible. We saw this data last week and we thought, wow, if we can increase the focus and investment in brand, not only do we see brand love shoot off the charts, people wanting to recommend us, people wanting to come back again, new consumers, discovering the brand, but we also saw a great efficiency on that tried and true lower funnel performance marketing. So when I think about Renaissance, it's revival. You see brands like us, American Eagle, Abercrombie and Fitch, they're all over the news doing it well. But again, in our case, I think it was a result of us leaning pretty hard into the brand marketing so that we had the right what being powered by the how.
Interesting. Ricardo, what's your take?
Yeah, great response to that. To me, it's a call to action, right? I think we've been operating under a pattern where there's been disruption followed by stabilization, right? Traditionally, from that perspective. And now the pattern is that we're kind of in constant and relentless disruption from that point of view. And the reality is, the principles of concept, capabilities, and culture require a new operating model. And really the reality is the constant is adaptability, right? And how do you continue to keep evolving and how do you stay relevant from that perspective based on all your actions that you take and understanding of the consumer that you have is really the way I look at it to that point.
So how do you create these concepts to build a stronger brand? to tell a better story of the brand? What do you do?
To me, a strong concept is when creativity delivers on identity and meaning. That's the way I look at it. And in reality, the consumer is inundated with choices, right? And what they prioritize is trust, status, utility when they decide, what to adopt, right? And your ability to, let's just say, deliver, right, on identity and meaning when done well really allows you to be able to connect with the consumer on a much more meaningful and significant level, right, from that point of view in terms of how you go about it. So when you think about that and decouple that, the idea of identity and meaning really is delivered in the form of, your tone of voice, right, the storytelling, right, as well as the product that you deliver. All of that kind of plays a role. And I think it's an important piece as you think about what brand really means and how do you deliver that as you think about your concept and either the content that obviously drives that, all of that kind of coming together.
I love that you mentioned consumer a few times, because I think for us, we start by putting the consumer in the center of everything we do. And in order to do that, you really have to know them inside and out. And so the way we think about content is we approach a season with what is a consumer insight that we can tap into so that it feels tight and ultimately the creative execution will break through the clutter. How do we stand for one thing, even though the brand could stand for many different things for people? But if you had to remember one thing for a seasonal campaign, what is that? And then we make sure that that marries back to the product concepts for the season, so everything feels tight and connected. And then we start to look at talent and think about different tiers. What's the role of macro or celebrity influencers? How do you activate the micros and the nanos at the bottom and really try to get scale at that level? And then what are you doing with the mid-tier to tell the story in their own way? And I think all of that word of mouth has helped drive even further credibility for the brand that already has a great product to start with.
So what's the hardest part in doing all of that, right? So you need to come up with the consumer insight. I guess that's not an easy game. And then tie it back to your brand, to your message, to the content, to all of the execution that follows through. If you have to choose, what's the hardest thing about all of that? What would that be?
I think across the board, in my experience, probably the flawless execution. It's one thing to have a great strategy and to put it on paper and sort of applaud the team, and you're so excited going into content development, but then to actually be able to pull it off and make sure that there's still that consistent through thread between experiential moments that you're launching, the content through the influencers, the content that you're shooting for yourself. All of it needs, to feel consistent to the point where if you were to take the logo off of the brand, whether it's an ad, a store experience when you walk in, an experience for the consumer on the website, everything needs to feel connected. And so it's all difficult but fun. I think the hardest part is the execution.
Why? Why is that hard?
Anybody can have an idea, but to execute flawlessly is, that's where brands win, I think, versus lose.
Yeah, I think there's a concept around, we all probably are familiar with it, product market fit, right? And kind of trying to figure out what that looks like and the evolution to that. And the reality to me is, I think you have to be able to internally and externally, from that perspective, how you think about things, not build a rigid and insular kind of mindset related to that, right? From that perspective, because again, it goes back to that word adaptability. From that point of view, and I think being able to kind of deliver on that, I think is really critical, and probably the foundation to a lot of that is your people, right? Yep. And I think that's a major piece in terms of, I think, the question you're asking, how do you kind of deliver on that? And I think that kind of goes into some of the, again, the principles we're talking about here, especially culture, to me, which is the foundation of all of this.
And I think your point about adaptability is a great one, in that you could have the best laid plans in the world, and if in the middle of them they're not working, you better be ready to pivot and either double down on what is, scrap something and try it entirely new. So I think that's what I've always found exciting about retail, is just the ability to be nimble and move fast, and that's what's expected, particularly in the middle of a campaign.
Yeah, sure.
So let's talk a second about the capabilities that you need in order to kind of realize the promise of what we're talking here, this flawless execution, the ability to come up with the insights, the ability to adapt your culture. What do you need in your organization in order to pull that off?
Capabilities or building capabilities is, to me, like enhancing a brand and enterprise's value, right, from that point of view. I think you have to become a master of your craft. You have to have some kind of core competency that you have as a business, right, that you can always go to, but you can't be a slave to your ideology, right? And I think that's really important. I follow Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, and he speaks a lot about, the continuous process of renewal, right, and the importance of a growth mindset. And a lot of that is driven by how do you achieve, whether you introduce new capabilities, right, optimize the current ones that you have. And the other piece I would add to this is about good habits, right? And I think the deep truth about good habits, I think that's sometimes missed, is a good habit has to become practice before you can optimize it, right, from that point of view. So you have to kind of look at those small wins that lead to the big pivots, and not just walk away from things, right? From that perspective, if you see they're not working, right? And how do you kind of, iterate, adjust, again, be adaptable as much as you can. And again, always look for how do you kind of build a system that potentially is always about, let's just say, embracing change. From that perspective, and adapting or at least adopting new technology, because that's going to be critical, and I think the capability part of this.
Do you have like an example for a habit that you formed that helped you with that, or a tip for the audience, look at how to develop such a habit?
Yeah, I think, for me, the way I try to look at, my team and the dynamics of my team, I'm always trying to challenge a little bit on, do we have the right org structure? Do we have the right, let's just say not process, because I think sometimes you can over-process and overthink process in a lot of ways. I think about interaction more. Right? How are we talking to each other? Right? How do we look at collaboration in a bit of a different way, as how do we collectively be able to find a purpose that we need to deliver on, right? From that perspective, and kind of make sure we're bringing each other along in the right way, right? Who needs to be in the room? What are the conversations that need to be happening related to that? I think that's a really critical part to being able to deliver on, I think, the question you're asking.
Yeah, I think building on that, what I look for in building teams, number one, that you kind of follow that old adage, that you can go faster alone, you can go farther together. And so there's going to be a slew of other analogies coming right now. Just hang on tight. But really, it's like you want people that play for the team on the front of the jersey and not the back. And they realize that it takes every single person at every level to be able to pull off what we talked about, the full 360 campaign, from concept to execution to measurement to the pivoting, et cetera. So it's really important that, they want to be a part of that. I think the second is, I love that you brought up growth mindset versus fixed. The no's can be difficult with those with a fixed mindset versus I'm intellectually curious. And maybe we've tried that before, but it was a couple of years ago, and now I'm going to look at this problem in a different way. And a lot of these problems, although technology is advancing, the retail industry, and some of the problems are different, a lot of it is the same playbook over and over again. How do you understand your consumer? How do you break through the clutter? How do you make sure that you have a well-articulated value proposition? All that stuff has existed for years. So I think those that approach it with intellectual curiosity are oftentimes the greatest team members. And then, your point about developing a habit, one of the things that as we are considering plans before they're finalized, before they're executed, there's great ideas that come from everywhere, from every single department. I have great cross-functional partners, but also, our loyalists of the brand, both customers, influencers, people we've worked with, they're constantly pinging us with, did you hear about this? Did you think about this? How about this person? That's one of our friends. What do you think about them? Engaging with the brand. And so, like I said, there's no shortage of good ideas, but one of the things that we always try to think about from a habit perspective is if we go into the season, what is the one thing, the headline, that we want the consumer to take away? Because they're not going to remember everything. And that's where that through line is so important. And if whatever the activity or the partner or whatever it is can't kind of master that test, then as a filter, it's out. As cool as it might be, it doesn't tie back to the brand DNA. It doesn't ladder back to whatever that 360 program is. So that's something that we're trying to put into practice as we vet all of these different ideas.
And another piece, I think, kind of taking off what you just mentioned, that's really important is, in order to really build, I think, capabilities, the diversity needs to be considered, right? And that's, diversity of thought, diversity of experiences, right? From that standpoint, gender, race, whatever you want to call it. But then how do you make sure that you're obviously making, everyone that potentially has, say, a voice and whatever expertise that needs to be had there, kind of allowing that information to be taken in. You'd be shocked, and I'm sure, Lana, you can speak to this for large organizations, how little we untap, some individuals within your organization because they're just either their voices are not heard or not listened to. So, there's I think a philosophy around this, the psychological safety and stuff like that, right? And trying to find ways to how do you make sure you build a culture of that allows that information to come through, because I think that will only advantage you even further.
And just one more thing on that. Over the past couple of years, there have been companies that I've been at that really believe in the Enneagram. And the Enneagram kind of categorizes people between 1 through 9. What's great about it is when you're managing teams, you can understand, particularly the people that, let's say, don't want to speak up, maybe they're shy or whatever that might be, that based on where they're at on the Enneagram, and then you can learn through studying all of the different numbers, how to pull them out and really get the best out of them, because you can't manage every single person the same. So that's been one tool over the past few years that I've found really, really helpful.
So how do you balance, we heard earlier today about, Innovation Fridays and all kinds of techniques like that. And you want your team to be heard. You want people to come up with ideas. You want to be innovative because you want to, be noticed. And from the clutter. But on the other hand, you don't want people to just go on every day and just shoot out as many ideas that they can possibly bring. Let's do AI this and let's do AI that, and everyone wants to do AI. And how do you balance between giving voice to your team members and encouraging them to come with ideas that can help you stand out, can help you with this flawless execution, and on the other hand, stay focused with what you need to do and execute on what you need to do?
I think there's two ways we look at it. So the first is when we plan a season, there's a period of about a month, 2 months max, after our design team and merchants walk us through, here's the inspiration for the collection, here's where we're going to double down on trend or particular colors or whatever that might be. And then we have this time period that's set to come up with all of those ideas. So the team knows that during, let's say, this 1 to 2 month period, the sky's the limit, right? And we look at things like within a season, cultural markers, in addition to, of course, all of the different product info that we've been briefed on. And that's really the moment for absolutely anybody on the team to come up with a great idea, to check in with their cross-functional partners to understand, what is the e-commerce team doing in loyalty? Is there something that we want to tap into within that season? So it's a great moment, again, to collect all of that. Then we go into a season, and you talked about process, and I agree. I think oftentimes companies can be over-processized, but if you have none of it, then you can't allow for the on-the-fly exploration and creativity that happens as a reaction to what's happening in culture. So then you're going to be stale. So the more that we can try to get our ducks in a row with these seasonal plans, then the more time there is for inspiration and reaction as we're in a given month. So that's how we try to do both.
Well, I would kind of address that. I think, originality isn't the only form of creativity, right? And you got to be careful not to put that level of pressure on the individuals within your organization. The reality is that, the most common form of creativity really comes from existing ideas, right? So being able to take an existing idea and, deliver on it in a more actionable and, let's just say, practical fashion is a competitive advantage. right, from that point of view. So to me, I think to really think about the unlock here from that perspective, you have to have a priority roadmap, right? And to your point, you have to have moments of where does the ideation need to happen and where are the deliverables, right, that we need to make sure we're achieving to as we kind of move along, as we see fit. But again, have a practice, I think, again, that is really centered around the relationships of the individuals. And that's really what unlocks, I think, the creativity and the collaboration that you want to have. I mean, there's the element that, people don't remember what you say, they remember how you make them feel. Right, from that perspective. So really kind of centering on that, I think, is really critical. And that's why I don't pressure the process piece as much as the interaction, because if the interaction is right and the people work really well together, they'll find the pattern, right, of the workflow and trying to be able to achieve against the objective.
So talk to me about the role of community in fostering this culture, and how the company culture then manifests itself with your customer community, and kind of this feedback loop between internal and external in driving this brand message, this brand loyalty, this cultural creativity, the ideation. How is that feedback loop working?
Yeah, I mean, out of these three, I mean, culture to me is the critical piece of all this, right? If you don't have the right culture, you can't deliver on strong concepts, you can't develop the capabilities necessary, right, from that point of view. So we have to deepen our concept of culture in order to harness its true value, right, and its ability to influence behavior. If you want to drive behavior, right, you have to activate emotion. And the only way to do that is you have to understand the dynamics of culture, right? You have to really be able to kind of dial that in. And that's an internal exercise as well as it's an external exercise, right? The culture you have within the organization, again, the interaction of the individuals, as well as how you're thinking about the culture of the consumer that you're trying to serve, right? And bring it together. Influencing culture is an act of fostering community. Right, and that's really what it is at the end of the day. It's how do you kind of pull together beliefs and values and languages and social norms and understand those components will allow you to be able to deliver on your consumer in a much stronger manner.
And I think we look at community in two ways. One is philanthropically speaking, because we do believe community is so important. Where are there areas that we really want to get behind and go deep and make an impact? And how does that tie back to the brand's purpose in general? And then the other is the community of customers that have huge amounts of brand love, are constantly engaging with us in social. And then I guess actually there is a third, which is some of these bigger creators that they work with who, they don't want full-time jobs, but they want to be almost full-time advisors to the brand. And so it's sort of those three different parts of community. How do we reach out and touch the community in LA, which is where we're headquartered, and some of our bigger markets? Two is how we engage with people on the social level. And then the last is our creator community. And I think all of that, the marketing team really touches all three of those areas. And so that would be the fourth, or perhaps the umbrella is the cohesion of all three of those together within marketing.
So can you tell us maybe a story about like an example of one thing that you did like that? Like how did you tie all of these together?
We are working on something for February. We will be at NBA All-Star Weekend. There is a...
You too?
And how many other people in the room? There is a great philanthropic element that's at the heart of the idea that taps into the influencer population, our social population, and then that kind of pillar number one was the philanthropic community. And so I think what you'll see there is a genuine and authentic leaning in to things that are really important to us. We'll be covering it in the appropriate way on social. So that's something coming up that I'm really, really proud of because it threads together all of those different communities. I think in the past, we've done a lot of different things. Programs that I've heard about, again, I'm pretty new, is we had a young creators program where we went out into different communities across the US. These were up and coming artists, sort of focused in different areas of art in their own right. We did collaborations with them, the last of which just launched a week ago, actually. It was with Blue Boy. Blue Boy has 140,000, give or take, followers, but he is so well known. His community loves him. He is known for sort of whimsical, my word, art. So we did a collab with him. He designed the entire collection for men. It looks incredible. The sales so far have been really, really solid, only a week in, and that would be an example of trying to tap into perhaps a slightly lesser known creator, give them a platform to really reflect their creativity, give them a voice, and that's exactly what we did. So that would be a past, but very recent past, and then an upcoming example.
It's very cool.
It's a practice of collaboration that's obviously really important for a brand, right? From that perspective, because that piece, every time that brand X connects with brand Y, you want there to be a bigger result that comes out of it from that point of view, right? And a bigger purpose. And, a lot of times for a brand to gain credibility, you can do that by tapping into, another company or entity's credibility, right? And it's a tactic, right? That's obviously very common. And it's just about how you do it strategically to deliver against it that I think becomes critical. To me, the ultimate achievement for a brand is your ability to elevate yourself beyond the product that you offer, right? And then you become, essentially part of the cultural narrative, right? From that point of view. I mean, one of the best examples of that from this past year is ChatGPT. I'm not even going to talk about AI, but just that company, right? That's part of the cultural narrative now, from that perspective, and the way you talk about it, the way you define it from that point of view. So those things are, I think, are unique and obviously important as you think about ways to stand out.
Well, we're running out of time. Maybe time for questions from the audience?
This is really for all three of you, but with multiple vendors and having to handle everything cross-channel through many different types of vendors, how do you, one, handle data continuity? And then two, how do you maintain cohesive messaging across those channels? And then a follow-up to that would be, if you were reevaluating your tech stack, would you prefer to have something that could do an end-to-end process, or how would you look at handling those disjointed messaging?
Take that first.
I think, with us, we have a really incredible e-com and IT team. There's been sort of some changes in the way we've looked at technology over the last couple of years to try to stitch everything together. We still think there's a huge opportunity with AI. So I think everybody can probably do even better and tap into a single source of truth and make sure that we are segmenting and personalizing the messages based on what we know is different about this pretty wide consumer group. In terms of the tech stack and any kind of overhauling, I think it's rare that you find one place that can do everything really well. But I do think it makes sense to look at partners that can help you look at what is the best solution unique to your needs and where you are in your journey. So this year might look very different depending on your growth trajectory and your data needs, and setting things up versus really accelerating them, say, versus the next 5 years. So that road mapping is really, really critical to success.
I think for us, I would say it's probably rooted on there being let's just say a bigger strategic platform, right, that we're trying to center the message around. For us, we center ourselves around basketball culture, right, from that point of view. So as we think about the various brands, whether it's Nike, Adidas, whoever it might be, from that perspective, we're usually trying to figure out how to obviously deliver a message against that platform. Now, there'll kind of be some unique kind of nuances that sit outside of that, which I think are important, but that's kind of at least the thread, right, that keeps it foundationally authentic to us as we deliver against that. And when it shows up on each of the channels, I think a lot of that is how do you obviously get the individual teams that manage those channels working and obviously collaborating together. You're going to see some nuances related to each of the channels just based on obviously what their intent is. But the idea is you want that narrative to be consistent, right, from that perspective. And obviously we try to look for the different resources that we can have outside of our own internal teams to obviously deliver upon that. So.
Hi. So as you kind of alluded to, there has been a lot going on in the zeitgeist, obviously, socially, politically, everything. And I feel like companies every other day are having to decide, when do you comment publicly? When do you keep it internal? What does that look like? What channel is the best channel to communicate that? And I'm just curious, based on your deep value of culture, how you handle that when you choose to go external versus just internal, et cetera. And obviously any examples are welcome, but no, that's obviously a touchy thing.
Yeah. No, it's a great question, probably a hot topic today. You know, for us, as we try to look at, you know, what's happening out there, it all centers back to what is obviously our internal values, right? Which goes back to the cultural conversation. You can't repeat that enough at this moment, right? What do we believe in and how it's not so much, about just, let's just say, our delivery, but the interpretation of the consumer. That's important, right? From that standpoint, how they receive it, from that point of view, becomes really important. You know, there's an element of cultural appropriation that's happening from that standpoint in some cases out there that you want to stay away from. Right, and how you go about things. And I think one of the critical words to this is how do you stay authentic? And the best way to do that is, again, is the understanding, I think, the elements of the emotional kind of pieces that are really happening around the cultural zeitgeist that's happening out there, and pick the spots in terms of the things that you obviously want to stand for and mean for. We obviously work in an environment, especially with a brand like Nike, where they really obviously have taken steps to, you know, to give you examples of standing out there and obviously knowing who their customer is and what value is going to happen. And understanding that when you do that, you're going to alienate some, but those are going to be the ones that obviously, again, are not part of your community set, right, from that perspective. And that doesn't mean you devalue that. It's just that this is what we are about and this is what we stand for. So.
Yeah, I think it does start with brand values and really understanding who you are and trying to figure out proactively what are the types of things that you want to address ongoing. I'm going to try to keep this purposely vague, rather than all of a sudden something happens and you dive in 100% and it's like, where did that come from? You guys have never even talked about this thing that is now all of a sudden so important. So I think that proactively figuring out what is important for you to talk about gives you authenticity. There are some brands, slightly different to the example I just gave, where you see them reacting so suddenly to something that's happening and it feels knee-jerk, and then sometimes they delete it, which is a whole nother panel. But it feels like if you just took a step back and really understood who you were and what's important to you, kind of like we do as people, brands are the same way, then I don't think you would jump into the fire so quickly and then not quite know what to do. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I love your point about that continuous element, right? It's something that you've constantly stood for from that perspective, and it's not that you're just showing up in a matter for that moment, right? From that perspective, I think that is critical. And that's really what drives that authenticity there, right? From that perspective. And it doesn't seem like, oh, why are they talking about that, you know?
Yeah, and I think just to add to what you said, that's why it's important to kind of pick your lanes. You can't be everything to everybody, because then every day in a given month, you'd be talking about a different issue and you would seem schizophrenic as a brand. So you really have to say, these are my top 3, these are my whatever they are, and go fewer, deeper, rather than try to address absolutely everything.
I mean, not to call us out, I just wanted to mention this, but one of my favorite brands is Patagonia. She had mentioned earlier, they don't talk about sustainability because it's just part of their DNA. Yeah. You know, that's the element of that. It's just part of what you do, right? From that perspective.
I think, just to add one point, this topic is not very much different than other venues of customer experience from your brand, right? You don't want to surprise your customers, right? It has to do with political statements and it has to do with offers, right? It's kind of like, where is this coming from? You guys don't discount, so And so it's not very much different from that perspective. You have your brand, you have your voice, you have your tone, you have your values, and they reflect themselves in whatever you do, whether it's a statement about the world, whether it's a promotion or anything else. It's pretty much the same. It's just a different trigger for the same way for a brand to express themselves. So.
Okay.
Well said.
Kirsten, Ricardo, Shai, thank you very much. Great conversation.